they vented, they flared. We are not going to flare our gas. We are going to harvest that gas because we need LPG. LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, is not that good. It's like you are taking medicine, but you know that some medicine is not good, but you have to take it. And that medicine will have side effects, but we do take medicine. So the medicine in LPG is to save the cutting down of trees for charcoal. Because this is what is happening in Uganda. Charcoal burning, trucks carrying charcoal come from all the routes that enter Kampala. That means the buildings you are seeing consume charcoal. So I'm saying that I need a factory to manufacture gas cylinders from here in preparation for the gas that we are going to get from our upstream developments. We are going to have more than 300,000 metric tons. And we shall use some of the gas to generate electricity to heat the pipeline because our oil is waxing.
Well, welcome back from the break. I could say Uganda and then East Africa at large has had issues regarding pollution, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases emissions. But this is a call that many people don't really take quite seriously. But then where does that fall? It's all about how we appreciate the society and then other issues. What do we fancy? Is it the politics, which is okay? You basically need the politics to transform almost all sectors in the economy. However, let's talk about the oil sector. Previously, we've had the EACOP, East African Crude Oil Pipeline. That's one of the biggest developments as of late, because we are talking about the development phase. And then there's been that kind of resistance from individuals. You could talk about the environmental activists. They don't really look into this project as a feasible issue. They don't think it will pay off because of the collateral that comes with it, the collateral damage in case it gets really off the frame that we intend to see it go by. So among these activists include the lady that we talked to earlier on, that's Hilda Nakawie. She thinks it's more of a disaster than a provident equation. However, previously, the Minister of Energy had a statement for us. I hope hopefully you had a great insight into it. So to understand these issues and how we can leverage policies around that basically look into protecting the environment, we talked to one of the researchers at Makerere University, and basically he as well works with the African Union of Conservationists. So basically they look at conserving the environment. And then in Uganda, he's one person that majored in issues regarding climate change and then vulnerability. He's an expert in ecology, among issues. There's a way he understands the ecosystem or biodiversity, you would say it. And it's quite interesting how he thinks the interrelationship between man and the environment has a bearing from the politics. Politics is all about administration. That's what he says. But how best can the administration propel environmental management for a sustainable ecosystem, especially when we talk about the green economy, the jobs that don't really create a detriment to the ecosystem, green jobs. Let's have a look at this.
Humans depend on plants for one reason or the other. And the plants also depend on humanity or other organisms for many reasons or the other. To begin with, and which is primary, is that you know that in this interdependence, the ecosystem will have a community of plants, a community of wildlife, will have the community of a lot of things within. Each of these, a lot of things in nature play a role to make the other survive. For example, in the community of plants, plants will work out oxygen which humanity will have to depend on. And then, part of the humanity and other oxygen, other organisms, they will have to emit carbon dioxide, for which the plant community will also depend on. So now that gives you a clear interpretation of the interdependence. Why? Because without this carbon dioxide, perhaps the plants might also not survive much. And also, without the trees or vegetation to provide oxygen, to emit oxygen for other organisms to depend on, they might not also survive. And that is the major beginning problem of your question of the environment. What is the problem with the environment?
Exactly.
When you put in a policy in place, it means that it must be supplemented by other enablers. The acts or laws, regulations, standards, bylaws, ordinances, name them. You might be aware that we have very good policies.
Largely, yes.
Very good policies. And again, what you have to understand is that Uganda is one of the first countries in the world to create a Ministry of Environment after 1992. If you're aware of that meeting, the general meeting of the Sustainable Development. And to begin the Ministry of Environment, that means environment management was prioritized then. Now the issue with the policies and its laws, it's not that they are poor policies, but the issue could be within the implementation. Who is playing what role in implementing what? And all these things are in place. To some extent, for them to be well implemented, they might require enforcement. They might require collaboration. They might require other resources in place to be efficient and relevant. Now, this efficiency and relevance, one of the resources that are needed are largely financing for us in order to be efficient. The framer has framed very good laws, but what I'm envisaging is that there has never been enough financial resources to implement the issues that concern with the enablers in place. And these are policies, the laws, legislations, guidelines, standards, etc. That is the main challenge, that there might be inadequate resources to effectively implement these resources, the laws.
Security has 3.987 trillion. If you compare it with climate change and environmental degradation, it's 2.6. In fact, it's 268 billion. Don't you find this more of a challenge? People deliberately, or the people in authority deliberately preferring something else other than the environment itself?
I am going to divert veer off a little bit from what you're saying. What I see in the prioritization, in Uganda we have a problem of dealing with posterity versus priority. I don't know if you understand what that means. Dealing with the things that you should have done at last, then you do them at first. Take an example. If we would have a restored environment in the Elgon region, in Rwenzori Mountains regions, could we have had this vulnerability that we are seeing now of the floods, these shocks that we see? But I think it's a month ago. Kasese it is this week or last week. So we could not have had it. But every time, something you should have done 10 years ago, and you do not do it, the behavior of environment is unpredictable to some extent. And when it behaves differently, then the resources that you should have used then, and in terms of finances this time, you now have to use them in dealing with vulnerabilities, rescuing people who have been covered by land, looking for experts, all these things, of which most times, and I believe that the planners, they normally have these components. But the problem is that prioritization. You, instead of dealing with the priorities, now you deal with the posterities. Things you should have done at first, you postpone them.
What do you think should have been considered 10 or 15 years ago in regard to these most sensitive areas, mountainous regions that are so vulnerable as compared to now?
Science. Science has been documenting this. This is a report of 1972, Global Environment Report to Monterey. You can see. It recommended, it has a number of recommendations, and recommendation number 1, which I'm reading for you, is that we recommend that the United Nations take immediate steps to foster and coordinate among the nations of the world a permanent global environmental monitoring system. We should have monitoring, and monitoring has been ongoing. We should have data, which we will deal with, analyze, use it to tell, project, and tell us the changes that are happening now and that those that will happen then, most likely. And these things happen at the global level, at the regional level, and at the national level. But to some extent, if your planning focuses on posterities, does not focus on priorities, then you get a problem of what you're seeing now. So the problem is within the dealing with the priorities and facilitating them as they should when you are planning in them. That's what should have happened. Give enough resources as they should be. And these resources should not only be money, but of course they hinge on money. It's hard for you to employ an expert to deal with this if you do not give them good money. Uganda has a lot of experts in these fields, but you may find a lot of them are not employed in this country because you pay them less, so they look for better opportunities somewhere else. So they go away. They could be doing this for some other countries. For example, maybe they could be in South Africa. They could be maybe in West Africa. They could be the ones sitting in UNEP office in Nairobi. But if you would have them here, they would say, this is what we want, and we can provide a solution. And even then, when they want to provide a solution, do you use the solution to deal with the solution on the ground?
The international community has generally been looking at one of the provisions to curtail greenhouse gas emissions. We could talk about methane, carbon dioxide, of course, nitrous oxide, among others. In Africa, you would say that we haven't contributed so much to GHG gases. However, the impact is far-reaching. From the north, when you talk about Marrakech, and obviously we shall be having the COP, that's the Conference of the Parties in Egypt, the 27th edition of that summit. So it's quite interesting. But drawing back locally, we have these policies. Like I said before, we had the National Environment Management Policy framework, obviously. We would talk about issues or policies that reflect the need to conserve wetlands, the need to conserve the forests, and the need to conserve the wildlife. We could talk about everything that falls within that range of the ecosystem. The trees, bamboo trees, the different species, flowers, and the flora and the fauna. However, reflecting upon these policies, playing through to achieve exactly what we want is one of the biggest problems, especially when you talk about provisions such as the polluter pays principle. This very researcher, Raymond, had to believe and says that in Uganda, such policies come at a shortfall. One, because of the conflict of interest. We're talking about administration, that's basically political. That has a conflict of interest. Administrators own businesses, they own industries, they are into manufacturing. So obviously, playing by the game, by the streamlined arena, is quite hard and confusing. There is no way they would settle down for like penalties for their carbon footprint. Let's have a look are these special understanding?
Priorities is the key thing. Now, even infrastructure that we're talking about, it is interacting within the environment.
Yes.
You are using materials, surface materials, to construct, for example, a road. You are using minerals to make products that you're going to use within the infrastructure. Still, you are affecting the environment. So, politics should be understood, and again, that it should be a way to manage the resources. A household, a community, a parish, a sub-county, a county, a district, and the country as a whole. It is a framework in which resources are managed. Let it be financial, let it be natural resources. But we also very well know that we depend on natural resources entirely. 95% of our development is based on natural resources. So when you choose the priority, it's what you go for. Kenya could have chosen to go for the infrastructure. Perhaps it's what they think that is going to safeguard them economically and strengthen them economically. Uganda, you said that Uganda has in terms of politics. Because perhaps Uganda could be looking at that we may need a lot of more of a neighboring environment, which is normally done through politicizing than prioritizing the infrastructure. But politics is very important, is key for everything to be done. Without politics, you cannot be successful. So that is a framework in which to first organize yourself. Uganda, we could be still in a way of organizing ourselves while we are prioritizing the politics. But every time that we are involved in our politics, then we should be able to understand, to evaluate ourselves. What have we gotten out of our politics this time? Look at that Ruviji channel. What do you think fills it up? Every time it rains, you see it is filled up. Plastic and so many other things. Now, why does that happen? Because we have not agreed, number one, on how to develop an urban area that we want to live in. Why? Every time you erect a building like this infrastructure, you are increasing or changing the hydrological flow or the environment flows of the landscape. Every time it rains, assuming there are 10 of these in this environment, you will generate more flows, surface flows, than what it should have been if there are not this infrastructure. And every time you are constructing and it is raining, you have all this that you excavate. It is carried downstream. When it is carried downstream, it will meet what Ivan has also had along the way. So they all go together. They end up in the channel. When they end up in the channel, you still have a force which is still pushing it, and you do not have enough space for them to continue pushing themselves up to wherever they should go. Now you clog the channels. Now you see the problem is within the planning. Exactly. It stems from the planning. And who should be planning? And planning for what? So then that means that the planning should have or embed a component of responsibility. When you excavate this, where do you put it? Before it is taken off by the runoff. But it feels down there. As it is moving, it meets these bottles, it meets all the things. Now what happens? Eventually, Boise will be submerged. And whose responsibility is that? Then you start saying, Mutuyambe are the ones who are failing the responsibility. The success will only be maybe in the next 20, 30 years if we only go back and educate, empower, to transform this society, beginning from young people who will not be thinking of money. So that when they're in the vehicle, they will say, Daddy, have you finished taking your water? Put this one here. When we get to the dumping area, we'll dump it there.
You talked about 2030, and it reminded me of something. According to projections, by 2030, Kampala will have an annual increase of waste by 60%. Likewise to Kenya, and then Dar es Salaam, 74%. this gets us back to one issue regarding the corporate bodies. Carbon trading has been one of the key issues that they think can help deal with the pollution. But then we still have the plastic pollution. Do you think the polluter pays policy has failed to be implemented in these African countries?
It goes back to discipline. It has not failed, but it goes back to discipline and enforcement. The challenge, it goes back to what I told you of dealing with posteriorities versus priorities. It has not failed. But the one, for example, in the Western world, if you decide to be in politics, then leave business. If you are Trump, you want to be a president of the United States, you cannot be involved in business. And if you are going to be involved in business, you have to account every resource that you have. And we know that you have become a president with this much, but you will not be involved in business. But what do you have here? You have a politician who is perhaps a member of parliament and who still goes and produces the polythene. And because they still want to distribute in a number of shops, supermarkets, etc. And they want the business to continue. They own the business, they own everything. Now what happens when you want to come to regulate, and for example you're a director of, executive director of National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, then you have this talk in Africa. I have seen it all the way from Cairo to Cape Town. Do you know who am I? Do you know where I am? Do you know what I can do? That is the major problem of do you know who I am? That you are not going to succeed. So it goes to the issue of responsibility and discipline. If this generator can be responsible to deal, our law now has what we call circular economy, can be responsible to know that today I produced 2,000 bags of polythene and they have been distributed in this much. Or you distribute sort of skips or bins on the streets and say, if you have, for example, used a polythene bag marked Raymond, or depending on the trademark that you have, upon using it, throw it in this skip. For me, after 1 week, I'll come collecting my polythene bags. And when I correct them, I will take them back into the circulation. So that the responsibility now and the business becomes cyclic. But then the priority principle, it has not been effective because they have not seen the value. Put it the value, perhaps. But what we have now, the generators are not interested in it anymore, but you have external interests which are coming in. For example, let me talk about Chinese. They are not bad people. They are those who are now going around collecting this for you. And when they take it, they recycle it, they get more products, and they still sell it. But every time you fail a single trip, you have ended its lifespan of sinking these emissions.
All right. And then as we conclude this talk, our conversation, there is something coming up, the Conference of the Parties, the 27th edition. And I think in Africa, we've had a couple in Kenya, Nairobi, talk about South Africa, and then Morocco. Now it's coming to Egypt. If you were to give a statement at this summit, what would have been your core address?
We would go back to what was decided when UNEP was established. You know when UNEP was established?
United Nations Environment Program?
Yes, in 1972.
Yes.
In Stockholm, when they established the Stockholm Convention. There are things they agreed to address since then. And every time now, I've never attended any COP personally, but I read what the declarations, the decrees, all these, the statutes that they come up with. Now, if I'm to give a statement, we go back to those core principles. What is our common future? That should be the principle. What is our common future? Are they oceans or seas? Are they lakes? Are they wetlands? What are they? What is our common future? This is the question that was framed some time back. Now you have Paris Declaration. How many countries that have succeeded with the Paris Declaration? You have New York Declaration, where Uganda committed itself to plant about, I think, 11 million trees. That was in 2015. Have they planted them? How are we progressing with that? What is our common future? As a country, as a region, Africa, as the whole world. Now, the problem is this. Tying money on all the activities, and who receives this money when they put these activities? When they receive these monies, finances, what is the success story that does exist of who has done what with these monies? Every year I hear of millions. For example, the last COP put, I think, how many billion?
In Scotland?
In tree planting. Who is that money? As Uganda, how much have we received to implement some of those agreements that were agreed upon and negotiations? Why? I think the major problem, if I'm to make a communication, is to address an issue of responsibility, which I told you as we began this show. Responsibility. Who is responsible for what? For example, now, who is responsible for the Russian emissions in that war with Ukraine? Who is mitigating the emissions which are coming out of those, the bombs, the guns, all that? Who is going to mitigate it? Is it Russia? Or it is our forests here, which Russia is not paying for? Responsibility. You must understand this word responsibility. It is very central to most of the things. When we are failing on responsibility, as leaders, as citizens, as a society, as a community, we are failing everything to achieve where we want to go. What have we lost? What have we gained? What is the net loss versus the net gain? Our gains now are the floods that you see in Mbari and Kasese.
Smart 24 is the TV, and obviously we are coming to you from Plot 42, Nile Avenue. So it's quite interesting talking about issues regarding climate. We drive the business, but obviously we can't drive the business without respecting the environment, because that's the stepping stone. So from the issues regarding activism to how well we can put it into force, to matters regarding the common features, the common goal that binds Africa, that binds North Africa, Europe, Asia, among other continents. It's an international cause, it's a global cause. When we talk about climate change, mitigation, adaptation, talk about carbon emissions. We've looked at the country and the international community all together at a time when we are in dire need. The need to transcend what we have now. Reliance on this society has come with shortfalls. Shifts in the season that we have, floods from all over. You would say Mbale, Kasese. Pakistan previously had the same issues. Sahel region, you can't talk about it. So among all those, this is the program where we address such matters. How we do that, it's like I say, it's a collective effort. And whenever we come to you, it means there is so much to talk about. I'm Ivan Tivenkana, and this is The Green Frontier.